Live from the Washington, D.C. area, all empowered citizens need to know about intelligent use of resources, smart governance, inclusive communities, smart industry, and healthy, thriving urbanization. This is Smart Sustainability, the TV talk about shaping a sustainable future in the digital age with Nicolette DeVidar. Mean what you say and say what you mean. Not that simple, is it? Particularly in the political climate we're in. The CATO Institute did a study last summer that revealed that 62%, that's 2/3 of Americans, are afraid of voicing their political beliefs because others might find them offensive. And it did not get any easier since last summer. It's the political beliefs that are driving this country further and further apart to the point where it becomes dangerous. So why are we having such a hard time talking politics, expressing an opinion, respecting one another for a different view? How can we learn to agree to disagree without tearing the country apart? Our topic tonight. Good evening. Thanks for being with us. I'm Nicolette DeVidar. We've seen it all throughout last year in the elections, the way the media talks, the way we think when someone supports a different political candidate. How easily people condemn and judge one another, how easily people get offended, how voices have been silenced, voters been demonized, violence on both sides pointed fingers at each other. We watch people being divided into good or bad, depending on what is deemed good or bad by the respective side. We see less acceptance and growing animosity towards people with a different view, in families, neighborhoods, workplaces. And then there's all this talk about inclusion, but what we're practicing is nothing but exclusion if you're honest about it. It's the epitome of polarization. And no, it's not just one camp doing it. A dangerous practice all around us that history has had precedents, and none of them were good. So, have we totally fallen prey to ego identification, agendas, fears, and personally colored viewpoints? How can we build a bridge, have brave conversations to navigate this deep divide and stop demonizing each other? My guests tonight are members of Braver Angels, a national nonprofit organization that helps people learn how to respectfully debate and possibly reunite. Now, how that works, we'll find out tonight. Joining me is Rebecca Cataldi. She's Senior Manager at the International Center of Religion and Diplomacy. We have Joshua Shen, Braver Angel member. We have Andrea Barron. She's also a Braver Angel member, works for a human rights organization helping immigrants seek asylum. We got Douglas Stevens, a former nuclear Navy officer. And we've got Omar Battle, who's community mediator and one of Smart Sustainability's community ambassadors. Welcome on Smart Sustainability, all of you. Great to have you on. This is a very exciting topic, obviously one that moves everyone and has been moving everyone for at least the last year since I can remember.
Thank you.
Wonderful to be here.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Great. Rebecca, I wanted to start with you. You are also a Braver Angels, and just for our viewers, I do want to clarify that all of our participants today are speaking as private citizens, not representing any organizations or taking viewpoints. So, Rebecca, you're a member of Braver Angels, but you're also a volunteer moderator for Braver Angels?
Yes, so, that's right. Meaning that I facilitate some of their training workshops and dialogue workshops and that sort of thing.
Give us a brief overview what Braver Angels does. Other than my little intro that I just gave, but what does Braver Angels do?
Yeah, absolutely. And I should mention that my day job at my NGO is not affiliated with Braver Angels. I'm just involved with Braver Angels as a volunteer. But it's been a wonderful experience. At its heart, Braver Angels works to depolarize America. And by that, we don't mean that we're trying to make people give up their differences and come to some agreement on issues, but rather that we're able to have more respectful conversations across our differences to better understand our differences and where they come from, and also to better understand our commonalities that sometimes get lost in the shuffle of the sort of toxic way of communicating we have. So a couple ways Braver Angels does this is first by holding training workshops where we train people on very practical skills for communicating across our differences, listening to each other, and having more constructive conversations. Secondly, by holding what we call red-blue workshops, which are dialogues between people who lean more to the right or more to the left politically, and helping us to have these constructive conversations and better understand where the other is coming from. We also have Braver Angels debates about critical national issues. And the difference between a Braver Angels debate and I think a traditional debate is that
wait, we'll get there. I don't want you to spill it all out now. Just an overview in terms of what Braver Angel is. And it's nationwide, it's organized in chapters, right?
Yeah, that's correct. So it's a nationwide movement, but it's also very local. So you can join your local chapter, which is called Alliances, and meet people in your own communities and have sort of a constructive space to talk about your views on various issues. And
it is open to anyone, correct?
That's right. If people want to join, they can join at the Braver Angels site. And we also have workshops that are open to both members and non-members that are just open to the public for anyone who's interested.
Okay, now let me move on to the other participants here and ask you directly. Douglas, why are you going there?
Why am I going there?
Yes.
Because I read an article in the newspaper. So my wife and I have been seized with this idea of there's a real problem in our nation of people not being able to talk clearly and honestly with each other instead of being driven to their political corners. And we've been brainstorming between ourselves and with friends, what can we do? Is there anything we could do to help solve this? And then one day I read in our local newspaper here in Falls Church City, an editorial by Curtis Schaefer. He was a former leader of our local chapter, saying what Better Angels is. It used to be called Better Angels, now it's Braver Angels, explaining what it was, and that it does exactly what my wife and I were hoping to do. So we showed up and have been there ever since, and are so happy that we found an organization that's doing this very common sense thing of just getting people to listen to each other.
Andrea, when you found out about Braver Angels, were you at a point where you said, now I got to do something about this, because similar like Douglas, you felt that the country was kind of falling apart? Or was that more like an inner urge that you wanted to speak about how you feel and get the point across?
My reasons were very different. I am a very strong liberal Democrat. I come from Massachusetts. I work with a small human rights organization, as we mentioned before, that works with immigrants. I work on Jewish-Muslim collaboration. Everybody I know is a Democrat. I don't have any friends, any family members, anybody in my work. I just don't know. I mean, I haven't gone out of my way to not talk to Republicans. I just don't know any. So I thought it would be great to, instead of just only hearing the views of people I already know, join Braver Angels, meet Trump supporters, Republicans, people who have very different views than I do, and talk to them in a respectful way. And I assumed, which was correct, that there wouldn't be anybody who was going to be yelling at me because they didn't like my perspective. So it felt safe. I could talk about, but rather than for me to express my point of view, it really was to hear what Trump supporters and Republicans believe about a whole variety of issues, rather than only reading about them in the newspaper or hearing about them on television. So that was my motivation, and it worked out really, really great. And I'm so excited that I became part of Braver Angels.
So you did this out of your own curiosity because you wanted to find out what Trump supporters were thinking and where they were coming from?
Exactly, yes.
Is this where the type of members you would find that are people who have already a certain disposition, that they say they go there because I'm interested in hearing the other people's point of view and I don't get this on watching television or things like that?
That's me. I don't know about anybody else.
Josh, what about you?
I mean, just in your last question, yes, I think going to these events is almost a shot in the arm I need after the cynicism and toxicity and the polarization you see around the world. So there is a level of self-selection for people who do go attend the Braver Angels event. Going to your first question about why I went to look for it, it was kind of funny because I also read an article and had a link. I went up and I could start donating money. And I was so moved by their mission because I hadn't seen anything like that. I started giving money. I put it on PayPal, monthly donation. And then I said, I got to go see this organization to see if it's not some type of national grift campaign, because, you know, I maybe was a little too impulsive about donating money. So I attended, and it was, in contrast to what Andrea said, I don't have a chance to, I think most of my peers, colleagues, and everything, they tend to be on the liberal Democrat side. And so there is a need for a space to communicate with people. And rather than meeting people from the other side, I meet plenty of people from the other side in this area. What I like to do is to kind of see if the other side is willing to see people who more identify as red for all the complexities, and then finding again where we have things in common and shared goals, and we just may have different approaches to getting to these goals.
I find that really interesting, because actually if people go there because they're already at a point where they're open for another point of view, and it kind of comes from an inner urge to go there and find out, I find this very hopeful. So let's Omar, you're a community mediator, and I know we've talked about this a little bit before too. So when it comes to mediation, normally, in the normal sense of mediation, people don't go to a mediator until they are so gridlocked that they know they can't go anywhere else, and mediation is the only thing. Have you seen lately an increase or a growing tendency for people to go to a mediator earlier and kind of have a more openness to see if you know, you can help people navigate through that, or understanding the other side or another person's view?
Yes, definitely. I have actually definitely seen an increase of people who want to come to mediation, because a mediator helps resolve the conflicts within relationships and communities by facilitating brave conversation. In order to have that brave conversation, people can't be conflict avoidant. You can't run away from the fire, you have to run toward it. You can't avoid the difficult discussions, the difficult questions, the difficult issues. So mediators help encourage honesty and authenticity. And one of the ways they do that is by asking open-ended questions, such as, what's that about for you? How does that make you feel? What about that makes you feel that way? Again, mediators help facilitate honesty and authenticity so people can have that brave conversation. And people want to have that brave conversation to resolve their conflicts, but they want to do it in a safe space. And mediators allow people to have brave conversations in a safe space.
Yeah, but my point was that there is an increase, so there's definitely a more openness. Now, let me ask you, and I don't know which one of you Braver Angels members want to answer this one. Do you see, is the membership kind of like even between red and blue people with a background, or is it like more, is there a larger percentage or disparage on who goes there?
I believe, Rebecca, why don't you take it? Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, my sense is that it's pretty even. It kind of depends where you are in the country. You know, where we are in Northern Virginia, for example, our demographics are going to be different than the membership might be in Texas. But I think the important thing is that the organization in its leadership and its approach is very much attempting to be balanced between more red viewpoints and more blue points. So for example, in the local chapters, where we call the alliances, there's always a red co-chair and a blue co-chair. When they develop training workshops and things, there's always a sort of a red collaborator and a blue collaborator to make sure that they're accessible and useful for people from both sides of the aisle.
Yeah, and also when there are debates, they make sure that they have an equal number of reds and blues speaking on the question. So it's very fairly balanced.
So do you know actually then in the debates, or if people, do they feel comfortable in voicing their beliefs, their opinions, their political association, or who they support? Or is this more in a more abstract sense?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely feel more comfortable in this setting. I would definitely not feel, I mean, going back to your initial poll from CATO that you started with, I agree with that about sensitivity, about sharing your political beliefs. But at least for me, in these events, I think because there is a balance, because there is a respect for everyone's voices, and people are pretty open to hearing other people's perspectives, I don't find that anyone hesitates.
The real value in these is that when you walk in, you're wearing a red tag or a blue tag. It's very clear what your beliefs are. And the whole point is to create a space where no one has to dance around an issue. You can speak honestly, openly, at a detailed level, and you're not going to get judged. You're not going to get shut down, but people are learning to listen. And it's sometimes exercising that listening muscle is a muscle people haven't used as much, and it's hard work, but it's a safe place to do it, and that's the whole value.
And also the Braver Angels debates, which are different from dialogues, because we do both, but unlike a traditional debate where the goal is for one side to win and out-argue the other, the Braver Angels debates, the goal is not for one side to win and the other to lose, but for everybody to come away with a greater understanding of the issue and of the different viewpoints about that issue. So I think whatever is said, everyone kind of walks away a winner because we all understand each other a bit better and the perspectives on the key issues facing our country.
Douglas, a related point, the goal is not to change anyone's mind either.
Yeah, exactly. But I want to ask you something. You mentioned something earlier, Douglas, and you said when people have a red and a blue tag, then you automatically know what they stand for. Is that really correct? Because I don't think so. Because I think what we're learning is much more that there is this wide spectrum, and there are a lot of different nuances in between.
Yes, you're exactly right. That's the whole beauty of this meeting. You can walk into your first meeting, and yes, you might have the idea that, oh, those people wearing the opposite color from me, I know how they think and they're bad people. But if you listen and hear what they're saying, the feedback from just about every meeting I've been in has been, wow, that was a thorny issue, but I came away from it realizing that those other people actually are much more similar to me than I thought. And they're human beings and they're reasonable. And I can understand why they think that. I still disagree with them, but I understand them as a human being now. So yeah, it could start off with black and white, but we're going to bring it down to the granularity of real people.
Okay, so that's how it works. Now, Rebecca, walk us through a debate, please. Like, what are some key characteristics in a debate that someone could expect? And I actually watched one on YouTube, just for the record. I did actually see one, but just walk us through. Like, what's a key characteristic of the debate? How does it start?
So I guess one thing I would say is that there's a protocol where there's a neutral debate chair, we call it, who's leading the discussion, and they'll ask first for, can I have an argument or a point of view in favor of the topic, and then can I have a point of view against the topic? And the people that are speaking are speaking to the debate chair. So if someone from the audience wants to respond or ask a question, they're not sort of responding and getting into an argument directly with the person speaking, but they're addressing their question to the debate chair. So that's sort of, that protocol and structure adds kind of a bit of expectations about this is how we're going to communicate with each other and keep it respectful. There's always an even number of people who volunteer in advance to speak on both sides of the topic of debate. So if it's immigration, for example, and the topic is there should be a wall built on the border with Mexico, they'll have an even number of people speaking in favor of that and against. And then after that, the floor is open to anybody who wants to make a statement. And that's where you get into some even more of the nuance, because there might be some people who aren't exactly on one side of the fence or the other, no pun intended, but they have a more nuanced view. And so it really, like I said, as Douglas was saying, the goal is not to convince people to change their mind. It's not to declare a winner or a loser at the end, but it's to have everybody come away with a better understanding of the issue and the nuances of the views on both sides.
Is that being said every time when there is a debate, so that the goal is not to convince someone to take on a different viewpoint, but to really just listen where they're coming from and try to understand the reasoning behind whatever their viewpoint is? Is that said every time? Or is this kind of like a silent understanding, or is this somewhere on the website and people find out during the meeting that maybe that's the goal?
In my experience, it's a bit of both. I mean, whether it's a debate or a training workshop, I think we try to make it clear from the beginning that, you know, the goal is not to come away convincing someone to change their mind. It's to be able to express our different points of view and understand each other and not feel, you know, attacked or judged or demonized, but just be able to have this constructive space where we can talk freely and honestly about the issues that affect our country. And that's part of why we have, you know, moderators and debate chairs to keep the conversation on track in that way. And, you know, if people are starting to veer off of the Braver Angels approach, to gently call us back to a respectful way of conversation so that everybody feels like they can speak freely without being attacked. And I think that's when you really get to the level of honesty and nuance and free expression that we need to have about these issues.
Yeah, and I'll say that in every meeting I've been in, that's been very explicit and very clear. In fact, I even remember one meeting where we debated whether we should even call them debates, because the word debate automatically makes people think of winners and losers, and that is absolutely not the point.
That's interesting. I wonder if debate, in terms of thinking that there's a winner and a loser, is this a US concept? Because I would not necessarily think in terms of winning or losing about a debate. For me, it's just an exchange of dialogue and arguments.
We need more people like you, Nicolette.
I don't know, but I was just, you know, as I hear you say this, I thought, like, I've never thought about having a debate and thinking about it in terms of who comes out as a winner or a loser. To me, that's just an exchange of arguments, of thoughts, reasoning, logic.
In our political debates, like, you know, say a debate between Biden and Trump, there will definitely be a winner and a loser. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean, so what they'll look at, let's say, you know, before the debate, you had 55% of the people supported Biden and 45% supported Trump. After the debate, if you had 53% that supported Biden, that's still 2 percentage points less than before. So that would mean that Biden, quote unquote, won the debate because he got more supporters as a result of the debate. Even though a majority still support him, we'd say he lost the debate. And, you know, following debates my whole life, that's kind of the way I remember it. They definitely are calling out winners and losers in political debates.
Yeah, exactly. But that sounds to me like it's a very narrow definition. So I can definitely see why there's kind of a redefinition and rethinking the word debate in some of your meetings. I totally get that. Omar, is this the approach that's been taken in the Braver Angels debates, for example? Are there some elements that are similar to mediation that you know of, like in larger mediations in town hall and larger groups of people?
Some of those concepts do apply to mediations or large group dialogues, but with mediation and the type of large group dialogues that mediators facilitate, there is a little bit of a difference. We want everybody to be as authentic and honest as possible.
So that's also in the debates there.
True, but we aren't looking to censor people. We want people to argue if necessary. We want people to cuss each other out if necessary. We do not censor people at the mediation table or in a large group dialogue. We want to hear somebody call somebody a name so we can jump in there and say, okay, what did you mean by that? What made you feel that way? We want to hear those things. So we're not necessarily looking to censor people. We want people to express themselves as freely as possible.
So I just want to say that I admire the work you're doing, Omar, but I do not think that Braver Angels is censoring people. I think we're just trying to be respectful in the dialogue. I've run a lot of programs on issues like you know, the Israel-Palestine conflict and so forth, where you have mock peace conferences and so forth. And what I always told the students is you can disagree with people, you can make your argument, but you have to be respectful. So you don't yell at people, you don't call them names, but it's not really censoring. I don't feel that we're censored. I just feel that we're being respectful and we're not calling each other names. I actually wouldn't go to these anymore if someone called me a name or yelled at me. I really don't want to hear that. So we don't think of it as censorship.
Yeah,
you know, it's go ahead, Josh.
Josh, what's your take?
I think in this day and age, you think about your Facebook debates. I think the primary issue is that people are just talking past each other. They're not even trying to win. Mm-hmm. No one thinks they're going to convince the other side on Facebook that they're going to come read this article, this link that I've given you, and it's like, I'm going to change my mind. Nobody has that expectation. And so today we've almost imbued in ourselves the expectation is we just have to shout louder, just vent, really. And that's the difference about the Braver Angel and perhaps the mediation that Omar is talking about is this is not about venting. You know, you can get your voice and your opinions very clearly across. But our goal is to see the complications in the opposite side. And I think in that way, Braver Angels and other organizations or grassroots conversations that are working in the same manner, we start with a real advantage, because if our world right now is so simplistic, they start with a really an unrealistic version of the world where everyone is, the other side is evil. All we want to do is say, human beings are complicated, and we may take one view here, we're not going to be 100% aligned with our party, and that's obvious. So when we open that space up for people to see it, we go back to realizing, the world shouldn't be this polarized.
Okay, then let me ask you something. I did read some of the comments that were in there, and I saw that there is a distinctive approach that Braver Angels take in the debate. Now, normally I would think if people would participate in these type of activities, obviously there is a natural attitude that you bring along, that you want to be respectful, because you already said you go there because you want to learn more about who the other person is. You want to learn more about their point of view. So I would think that most people who participate bring already a certain curiosity. I think that's fair to say, right? And a certain open-mindedness that comes along with a level of respect. So when you have that debate, you really go more into listening and hearing someone else talk. Now, my question is, can you take what you learn from the Braver Angels or that approach and apply that to different scenarios? Like, for example, if you have two people sitting in a bar, although we know now with COVID, that's not right now, that's still a way out, but you know what I'm getting at. Can you see someone in that sort of an environment where it's not planned, where it's not in an environment where you're protected, exchange views and still be open to one another?
You know, they say you learn everything you really need to know in kindergarten. I think the answer is absolutely yes. And all Braver Angels does, I think, if you boil it down, is sort of institutionalize things like kindness, active listening, open-mindedness, cordialness, giving other people the benefit of the doubt. So these are things that absolutely every person should have in every interaction. But sometimes we get so far off of that ideal that we need an organization like Better Angels to sort of give us the structure to get back there. Otherwise, we wind up one of Omar's clients, right?
All right, let's talk a little bit about experiences. I'm really curious to learn more about your personal experiences. Let's start with Andrea. Has anything changed in your perception in how you see, for example, today a Trump voter or a Trump supporter? Since you've gone through the
I have a few examples. So one is we had an event at the Braver Angels in McLean, and there was a speaker from the National Rifle Association. So in my world, these are bad guys, the NRA. And I myself have demonstrated quite a few times in front of the NRA headquarters in Virginia. And so the speaker was very compelling. He was friendly, that helps. Then I found out he was from Massachusetts, my state. So I went up to him afterwards and I said, in a funny way, how did you end up being from Massachusetts and you're an NRA supporter? How did that happen? So we had a little chat and a conversation, and he didn't change my mind. I didn't change his mind. I understood a little bit more why he came to that particular point of view. And it made me more understanding, more tolerant of people who have that position. I'm just as firmly opposed to it as I was before, but it changed my view of some of the people who are NRA supporters. And he was an official from the NRA. And I remember telling my friends, hey, I met this guy from the NRA and he was really a nice guy. And they said, no, that's impossible, So, and then the other story that I told before is I am very strongly pro-choice. I'm Jewish, and people in the Jewish tradition believe that life does not begin at conception. And we do not like the idea of the government saying to Jewish women that they cannot have an abortion. My mother, I've been involved with, my late mother feels very strongly about this with an organization called the National Council of Jewish Women. So this is something I grew up with. But I used to work with a nun who was one of the kindest, most wonderful people, very pro-immigrant. She's one of those people who used to get arrested. She was in her 70s and have handcuffs put on her, standing up for immigrants. And I just saw her, interact so often with the immigrants that we work with. And I know she's against abortion because, she's a nun. So one time I said, okay, I'm going to use the skills, going back to what Douglas said, Braver Angel skills that taught me how to have a conversation with her about abortion. And I know she'll be respectful for me, but I also learned from Braver Angels that when she says something I disagree with, I will not get angry. I'll just listen. And I did, and it was a great conversation. My intention was not to change her. She didn't certainly want to change me, but I used those Braver Angel skills in that conversation. And then after that, I actually had another conversation with an intern who I knew was very strongly anti-abortion. And I did it a second time, and it worked. Again, nobody's going to change the other one, but the Braver Angel skills, just like Douglas said, they institutionalize, they teach you a new way of interacting with people who you disagree with. And those, I have other examples too, but I wanted to just share those two examples.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Josh, what about you? You want to share, a certain experience that you had that kind of changed your mind on someone or on an issue?
So going to abortion, I think one of the more clarifying things is to see that the people on the other side, some of them are not for, some of them are pro-life. And so it definitely dispels that simplistic othering of the opposite side. And it reaffirmed something I've been trying to practice in terms of that barroom conversation that you mentioned, is when I try to talk to somebody and it gets deeper enough where we feel confident enough to talk about politics, I always like to ask them, what is one policy view where you disagree with your own party? And not disagree because they don't go far enough the direction, but you actually strongly disagree. And when they are able to sometimes take a step back and think about it and see that, reveal that, and I would reveal my own, it definitely lowers the guard a lot for a lot of people. In the Braver Angels activities, one thing that I've been doing, I think, is showing the blues that I have views that I may disagree with a lot of the reds. So I came from, personally, I've always been very kind of working class, left-leaning, progressive on a lot of issues related to war and civil liberties. And when I discuss these are the things I believe, yet I'm still consider myself a red or a conservative, it changes both sides' minds a little bit. And so I find that very rewarding.
Douglas?
I like the story Andrea told about the guy from Massachusetts who was, and I remember I was sitting next to you, Andrea, at that meeting, and I remember us chit-chatting at the back and actually getting shushed at one point. But I remember you said something to the effect of, he's a delightful young man. And you said it with a sense of like, you were surprised that you would hear yourself say that about someone who was working for the NRA. And I thought to myself, you know, this is a little snippet of what Better Angels is about. There are more of those moments out there that need to be had.
Douglas, now I'm remembering the conversation between us. I'm remembering now.
Rebecca, you got something to add? I'm sure you got your own story where you probably figured out, oh, this is very different than what I had expected it to be.
I guess one experience is I was participating in one of the Braver Angels dialogues, which is different from the Braver Angels debates. You know, debate is one part of many different types of things we do. So this was a dialogue where we were asked to reflect on sort of what drove our own values, whether we lean more right or left, and why we thought they were good for the country, and what concerns we had about, you know, others within our point of view, and what we wanted to see going forward. And so I tend to lean more to the left on most issues. I'm Catholic, and that's what guides my political beliefs. So on things like immigration and healthcare, war and peace, death penalty, I tend to consider myself more leaning to the left, even though I'm independent. But on certain issues like abortion, you know, I'm very pro-life, which is typically more associated with conservatism. And so I was talking about all these things as a dialogue participant. And at the end, one of our members, who is actually pretty high up within the Republican circles, came up to me and said, you know, it's so wonderful to hear someone who considers himself more blue, who is also pro-life. Like, this is so nice that we have this in common. And she just gave me a big hug. And I thought, how wonderful is that we could come to appreciate that nuance about each other and find something deep that we have in common, even if we have differences on a lot of other things. So that's, I guess, that understanding of that nuance, and that, you know, those connections and that discovery of common values is something I've really valued about Braver Angels. And I think our country could benefit from more hugs. So,
well, it sounds like it really brings out the complexity, the human complexity, and the complexity of the issues. And perhaps people are beginning more and more to see that really dividing things only in two categories is unbelievably short-sighted. Exactly.
Rarely is there only two sides to an issue. And I think human beings are very complex, and we don't always realize the nuances of what people think if we just ascribe some sort of label to them and then attribute to them whatever we think that label means, which might be much different from what they actually think and feel. And I've had that happen to me. And, you know, being in the Braver Angels environment, I think that's why a lot of us are drawn to that, because people are willing to listen and hear out the complexity and want to understand that, instead of just, you know, labeling you and attacking you.
Now, Omar, in mediation, you must have encountered cases where people suddenly came up and said, well, okay, I understand the other person's point of view. Or do people in mediation more, I don't want to use the word cave in, but get to a point where then they're at the end of the process, they're just so tired that they then are more readily to say, okay, I'm going to go with that because it's more compromise? Or have you encountered situations where people then would say, I understand where this other person is coming from?
So in mediation, I have seen both. But the goal of mediation is to turn conflict into collaboration. There will be times at the mediation table where two people are having a disagreement or an argument. It could be a husband and a wife. And as that conversation proceeds, and as the mediator continues to facilitate that conversation and ask important questions, such as, what's that about for you? What do you mean by that? What makes you feel that way? People start to understand each other better. So you might have a husband or a wife who now says, oh, now I understand what you meant by that. Now I understand what made you react that way. A person could react that way because of something that their parents did to them in the past. I've ran into situations where a father had been abused and the daughter did not know that. And that is the reason why the father was behaving the way he did today. So things like that are unveiled in mediation that allows people to understand each other better. Mediation, in a sense, can introduce people to each other's humanity. And there comes a point in mediation where two people are ready to collaborate to resolve their conflict.
Let me ask you something, and that question actually goes to all of you. I do see some parallels, and I think the thread there is that the dialogue is facilitated by another person. So in mediation, you got a mediator, whatever that is, in whatever group setting. In the Braver Angels debates and dialogues, I suppose too, there is a chair who moderates and facilitates the dialogue. Now, let me ask you, are we at a point where we need a third person to open up to because we feel safer if it goes through a third person versus speaking directly to someone about what we believe or what you think about it?
I don't think we necessarily need a third person, but I think in the setting of a facilitated dialogue or a debate, having that third person gives the sort of structure where people can focus on expressing what they want to say and listening to the other instead of trying to, alongside that, also manage the conversation. But I think it's also a way of sort of building the skills among people, because the moderator of the dialogue or the debate is also sort of modeling a way to ask questions or to communicate that's respectful, that leads to a meaningful exchange of ideas, but doesn't devolve into, gotcha questions or demonizing the other. But that's part also of why a large part of what Braver Angels does is training workshops on communication skills to equip people to go out when they're having personal conversations or one-on-one and they're not in a structured dialogue or a debate, so that they can use these things and put them into practice just in their daily lives around the country. Because I think that's a lot of what it really comes down to, is that, to make our country better, we all need to get better as members of having these conversations in a respectful way within our own communities.
And just have the conversations, because very often, or up to this point, we're not having conversations. They very often, because exactly for that reason. That's why I was wondering, so do we need all sort of a booster just to feel you more comfortable or get more comfortable in a setting where you talk more about these things, that propels you to also feel more comfortable in a one-on-one setting?
I don't think we need this. I think going back to what Douglas and what we've all said in Braver Angels, is that we make some separation, which we always used to do in the United States, and any kind of dialogue between the views of a person which you disagree with and that person themselves. Maybe the person isn't evil just because they have views that you totally even find abhorrent. I'll give you a specific example. Another example of how I didn't tell this to Rebecca or Josh or Douglas yet. I use my Braver Angels skills. Is I went to a pro-Trump rally because I am curious about meeting, people on the other side. So I would classify, not sure if this is correct, the Republicans, the Trump supporters I've met at Braver Angels as moderates. Moderate Trump supporters, moderate Republicans. Maybe it's not true, but that's kind of what I've encountered. I haven't encountered what I would call the crazy. So I also wanted to meet some crazies. So I went to the pro-Trump rally, and this is on November 14th, putting kind of on my journalist hat, and I met these two women. They were from Baltimore County. And I said, oh, they seem very pleasant. Why did you come to the rally? And they said, oh, because the Queen, and they looked at me straight in the eye. They believed what they told me. Did you know that the Queen of England is running these hunting parties where people shoot down naked children, and only Donald Trump is going to save all those children? So I put my Braver Angels. Oh, okay. Don't get angry. Just, listen. And so I said, oh, where did you hear about that? And they said, oh, I saw it on YouTube. And I said, oh, okay. And who do you think is behind this? And they said, Barack Obama, George Soros, Donald Trump is going to save them. This is QAnon, obviously, the QAnon theory. So I left, and I kind of said, oh, I was proud of myself because I had a conversation with what can you say about these people, without yelling at them, without getting angry. I just had a conversation. I know who they are. I didn't have to express my perspective. And I just felt, very proud of myself, actually. And those were I didn't meet anybody like that at Braver Angels. But I used Braver Angels skills. So that's just kind of what I think. I don't think we can have, mediators in every conversation with people who we disagree with. We just have to listen, be respectful, at least of the person, even if we disagree greatly with their opinion. And I think we need to move back to that in all over the world. It's not just in the United States.
Oh, but I think it's definitely more prevalent in the United States than in any other country I know of. I mean, let me tell you that. I think that I have never experienced where people would be so identified with a color of a political party. I mean, seriously. This is for a lot of other nations, that's just politics has been politics, but it's not who you are. But I've come to learn that here it's much more that people think this is who you are. And I think that's the crux of the matter.
I agree with you.
Another thing I would say is that a lot of times people are taught to basically fight each other in a sense. My sports team versus your sports team. My state versus your state, my country versus your country. I'm an Android user. I'm an iPhone user. My piece of technology is the best. No, mine is the best. So we essentially live in a country where it's all about competition, competition, competition. So that, in a sense, leads to some of the conflicts that we have now, I believe. Again, competition, competition, competition. In regards to do we need a third party to help resolve conflicts or to understand each other, I would say sometimes we do. At the end of the day, I need your help to understand you just like you need my help to understand me. Nobody can be a spokesperson for another person's mental, emotional, or physical well-being. They can't be a spokesperson for another person's thoughts. But a lot of times people hear, but they don't listen. And that's why they need that third party. Interpretation can lead to misinterpretation. In other words, lost in translation. And that's where that third party comes in. But when you come to that third party, you have to know that you don't have to censor yourself, censor your language. Come as you are. You don't have to put on your best suit and play pretend. That's where a mediator comes in.
But I think that's what we're all learning, Omar. I think everybody is learning to come to the table with just who they are. I want to ask, Josh, can you give us an experience that was kind of the most challenging for you in some of the debates or dialogues that you've attended with Braver Angels that really stretched you and said, yeah, that's challenging for me?
I think sometimes it's to remain respectful, frankly, to say, hey, you're crazy, for example, and I can't recall something, but just now I'm talking with Braver Angel Andrea, and she's like, these QAnon Trumpers, right? And I was thinking, my immediate thought was, I've spent 4 years watching MSNBC talk about Russiagate and how Trump was a secret at Russian assets since the 80s. Things like that. And that most of my friends still firmly believe, yeah, there's something in there. There's definitely there. And for me, it's like, listen, that is pot calling the kettle black here. So I guess I would say, even here in our discussion today, I'm like, oh my God. One side, there's always this notion from what I see the other side as saying only one side has the facts, only one side can be fooled by disinformation, only one side is kooky, frankly. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, I have to respect their time to speak. I have to wait my turn. I have to give other people a chance to speak. And so, yeah, I sometimes want to vent all of the things that I can't or is useless. And I say, in a respectful way, no, everybody has these issues. I'm the first to acknowledge our problems with there's a lot of people on the right that have problems. But to me, I sometimes get frustrated that the other side can't do more to recognize their own side's problems.
Douglas, you got something to add? What was the most challenging for you?
I don't know about a particularly challenging thing. I've enjoyed the tension of, in my own mind, tugging on one end of a rope and having someone else tug on the other end, and realizing that, there are very valid points. And a lot of times I've noticed that in my own mind, if I boil down the difference of opinion between myself and someone else, it's not because either party has a flaw in their logic, has ill intent, has gross misinformation. It usually boils down to they simply have a few different fundamental foundational beliefs that then lead them logically and reasonably to that conclusion, which kind of brings me back to something Rebecca said, which I really love. I want to put it up on a bumper sticker or a t-shirt. She said, our country could really benefit from more hugs. And to me, that speaks of something larger. It means, do we approach division with the mindset of there's this group versus this group, or do we approach it from the point of view of we're all Americans, we're all family members, we're already together, we're already in the same family, we're already in the same ship of state together. And now let's learn from each other and together find the right answer, which usually is probably going to be something a little different from what either side is coming in with their starting position, right? We do need more hugs, and we need to start out from the idea that we're actually all Americans here, and we should be working for the same goals.
And that's actually a great segue over to my next question, because that's exactly what I wanted to ask. So we are now at a time where we know we are in the age of complexity. So we know that the simplistic views no longer apply for anything that we can do, because we live in a complex world. You can't just reduce complexity and make it simple, because that becomes the concept of exclusion versus inclusion, right? So then when we look at the polarity and how debates are approached, is it maybe time to rethink even our political concepts in terms of Republican and Democrat? And when I hear all of you talk about, let's look at what our common values are, what we all want in the future, because reality is we sit all in the same boat, and a lot of our structures and systems and institutions are changing because the world's changing, right? So then when it becomes more complex, really, do we need to rethink about that?
This is what some people have called the realignment. Yep. Because ultimately, I consider myself more of a populist. Now, that's a dirty word now among most Democrats, but it's really populism. If you think about William Jennings Bryan, a lot of it came out of progressive ideas. And to me, Trump was unique because he tried to tap on some of that populism. You can disagree with the messaging, the way he spoke about things, but there's an idea that we are disempowered, and then people who have more money, more power, more decision-making capabilities are trying to keep us divided. Now, again, I don't want to search for enemies, but I think there is something there about realignment. And if we can stop being distracted on some of the smaller issues and realize some of the people who actually have power are trying to keep us divided, distracted, then we can work together as Americans more.
So you see going forward, we got about 3 minutes left, so let's focus a little bit on the future forward. You see that we change the whole outlook in terms of probably even what politics means and what it doesn't.
Right. I mean, the two-party system, exist to perpetuate the two-party system. The media wants especially the established media, wants to the independent media to be crushed because they want to be gatekeepers of information. And so we need to break down those existing power structures who want us to keep being divided.
And dialogue is the way. Douglas, I saw you nod. You got something to add? How do you see the future?
Boy, that's a big question. But you're right. We've allowed ourselves to get shoehorned into only two opinions, and you know, Josh is right that what you see on the news and read in your Twitter feed or whatever tends to drive you back to your corner. But let's come out of our corners. Let's remember that America needs more hugs. Let's start from the place that we're in this together, and let's listen, because the answer is probably somewhere up here, not in either one of these two corners.
Andrea?
Yeah, so, you know, I think I might be probably the most partisan person here from Braver Angels. I definitely am a partisan, there's no question about it. So I actually apologizing, but I think that Joe Biden is trying to unify this country. He is trying hard to make it clear that he's the president of the Reds as well as of the Blues. I think he's genuine about that. I think there's a lot of Democrats who would not genuinely reach out to the other side as much as he is. I'm a progressive, he's a centrist, but I think we need a centrist at this time. And I'm hoping that he's going to help unify the country. For myself personally, and I think I mentioned this before, I've learned a lot now from, it seems like quite a lot of the Trump supporters, even the ones that I met, are small business owners. And they are very, very worried about losing money, losing their businesses during the time when we have businesses were closed. And I still support closing the businesses to save people's lives, but I've now opened up, and again, Braver Angels, it's the spirit of Braver Angels.
Yep, that sounds awesome, but we're going to have to move along. Any last words, Rebecca, that you want to share? And then I want to give one to Oma, but it's got to be quick.
Yeah, I would just say as an independent, I would love more political parties, more options. I would also love to see some reform to the voting system where like more of a proportional representation, but also the political parties, I think they are and they should be a means to an end. The end that we want is a better America, and the parties should help us get there. They shouldn't be the end in themselves. We're not voting for a party, we're voting for America.
On that sense, thank you so much, all of you, for coming on, and thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next week. Have a good night.